Today we're going to talk about vitamin B6 deficiency symptoms that you've never heard before. Now, the data I'm going to share with you is out of this book right here, one of my favorite books, Laboratory Evaluations for Integrative and Functional Medicine. It's amazing because it covers every aspect of nutrition in depth. So I've tore this book up many times, so it's fantastic. Now, what's interesting about B6 is that if you look this up, they will tell you it's very rare to have a deficiency. And they never talk about this idea of subclinical deficiencies of nutrients. Instead, they focus on these major deficiency symptoms. But this is going to be an interesting topic. Let me just kind of go through it. Most people might know that if you're deficient in B6, you'll typically have rashes around your nose. You might have cracks or rashes around your mouth. You might even get pink eye as a symptom. You can get anemia, as well as neurological problems, which involves numbness in the bottom of your hands and your feet, which typically come from a B1 deficiency, but also from a B6 deficiency. Some people might know that you can get depressed if you're deficient in B6. But today I want to talk about all the other problems that you could end up with if you're low in B6. But first, let me just kind of give you some interesting information about B6. Vitamin B6 is involved in over 140 different enzyme pathways. So you can imagine how broadly this vitamin extends into our bodily functions. And yes, there are toxicity symptoms, but typically B6 is a water-soluble vitamin. So you would have to consume over 1,000 milligrams of B6 to have some problems. Now, typically there are no side effects if you're taking less than 200 milligrams per day. But the side effects start going up if you get over 1,000. And the main side effect will be neurological issues like neuropathy. So neuropathy can come from a deficiency of B6 and too much B6. But rarely do I know anyone taking over, 200 milligrams per day. Now, the other interesting thing about B6 deficiencies is it can be used as an indicator for inflammation status. It's highly correlated for C-reactive protein, which is an inflammatory biomarker. And people, especially with gut inflammation, IBS, have low levels of B6. And when people talk about B6, they're really talking about a collection of a group of different compounds that are precursors to the active form of B6. And the active form is P5P. I won't get into the long name, you don't need to know that. But when you see the form P5P, that is the active form. The other forms are like precursors that have to turn into this active form. And the food to achieve the best bioavailability of B6 would be from beef, pork, fish, and chicken. Dairy and eggs are not the best source, and even plant-based B6 is not the best source. So here are the symptoms that very few people know about that are related to a B6 deficiency. I just mentioned inflammation, so let's put that on the top of the list. So inflammation, especially of the gut, could be related to a B6 deficiency. Number two, B6 helps control polyunsaturated fatty acids. Those are the ones that I always tell people to avoid, like from corn oil, soy oil, canola, cottonseed oil, things like that. And also, if you're consuming a lot of these oils and you can't metabolize it because you don't have enough B6, this can lead to the dermatitis rashes that I mentioned when I first talked about this. Number three, B6 is intimately involved in making neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and you can imagine all the symptoms that can occur from having a deficiency of neurotransmitters. So in other words, B6 is necessary to make all of these neurotransmitters. So it can affect your mood, it can affect having addictions, it can affect your general state of just nerve communication. Number four, B6 is involved in the conversion from something called ALA to DHA. Now, what is that? Walnuts have a good amount of ALA, which is a precursor to the active form of the omega-3 fatty acid. So let's say, for example, you don't consume a lot of fish or fish oils or cod liver oil, and you're doing a lot of walnuts thinking that you're getting all the necessary precursors to make your omega-3 fatty acid. Well, without B6, you might not be able to convert this as well, and this could lead to more inflammation. All right, the next one, number five, B6 is necessary to make selenium work. Now, selenium is involved in a lot of other things from making glutathione, to involved in converting your thyroid hormones from the inactive to the active. So you can see indirectly that B6 deficiency could lead to all sorts of other deficiencies related to a lack of selenium doing its work in different enzymes. Number 6, B6 is necessary to convert tryptophan into niacin. Number 7, B6 is necessary in a lot of different things related to amino acids. One of the things that can occur as a problem is alopecia, hair loss, because you don't have enough B6. In another study, I found that B6 is intimately involved in an enzyme that if you're deficient, you can have a higher risk of getting seizures. If you know anyone who has seizures, you should make sure they're consuming more B6. Another thing that B6 is needed for is lowering homocysteine, which can affect your heart in a negative way. Typically, people might know to reduce your homocysteine, you take enough B12 and folate, but B6 is also necessary as well. So let's say someone's deficient in B6 and they also have a problem with their gut microbiome. They're greatly more susceptible to having autism than if they just had a B6 deficiency and they had good microbes. In other words, there's this whole gut-brain interaction that can influence symptoms of autism, especially if you're deficient in B6. Does it all come from diet? Actually not. A portion of this B6 comes from your own microbiome in the large intestine making B6, just like it makes a lot of other B vitamins. So this relates to one of the reasons why people are deficient in B6 when they take antibiotics, especially for things like TB, because of this lack of B6. Anyway, I would just recommend if you know anyone with autism, make sure they're taking the active form of B6, P5P, as well as taking a good probiotic. And just to give you a little more information about that, B6 helps regulate or suppress gut pathogens. So those are the symptoms, but how are people deficient? Well, eating too many processed foods, also taking diuretics. Certain medications like high blood pressure medication can create a deficiency, taking certain antibiotics, also being on birth control pills, drinking alcohol. If you're pregnant or lactating, also smoking creates a deficiency. Certain herbicides, as in glyphosate in all the GMO foods, and even taking high levels of an herb called ginkgo biloba can create a deficiency, but you'd have to take quite a bit of that compound. Now, because of the censoring and the suppressing of the algorithms on YouTube, it's becoming more difficult to find my content. And there's a lot of content that I cannot put on YouTube, unfortunately. So to make sure you have full access of all my information, go to drberg.com and subscribe to my newsletter by clicking the link down below in the description. I will see you on the other side.